and Mark can introduce himself and get going on his presentation.
All right. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Mark Cohen. As you've heard, I am a sociologist at Seattle University. Um, and several years ago, I decided that since I had tenure and I didn't give a damn, I was going to start bringing puppetry into things that I into my day job. And eventually, that resulted in a class that I now teach at Seattle U called "Can Puppets Save the World?" And what I do in that class is I wanted to have an organizing theme for a sociological exploration, and I landed on the rise of censorship in America today. And so the way I connect that to puppetry is through what I call the anti-establishment history of puppetry, which I don't claim to be the entire history of puppetry, but it is a part of it, and it's an important part of it. And so the more that has sort of led me down this rabbit hole of that brings me here today to be able to talk to you about puppets and political resistance. Um, but this is not the formal beginning of my presentation. So I'd like to actually formally begin. I'm trying to get that notification off of my screen, and it doesn't want to go. There we go. Um, so now I'd like to formally begin my presentation. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Nificent, Dr. Maggie Nificent. I am an esteemed socio-puppetologist. Now, what that means is that I am an expert in the ways that the world of puppets intersects with the dynamics of human social life. It sounds very highfalutin, I know. It is because I'm very, very, very smart. I know an enormous amount about our topic today, puppets and political resistance. I could share stories for hours about how puppets have been instrumental throughout history in satirizing leaders, challenging corrupt authorities, and amplifying the voices and conscience of good people everywhere who are being wronged. But I'm far too busy and far too important to spend time that way, and I'd rather be playing video games. So I'm going to do what I always do in situations like this. I'm going to delegate. Now, I have an assistant, at least he calls himself my assistant. I think of him as my lackey, but nevertheless, I have an assistant, Mr. Cohen, doctor. He says he's a doctor. So doctor, we have to call him Dr. Cohen, I suppose. If you don't want to, I don't care. I really don't. So I'm going to call on my little lackey to come and give you the presentation that really comes from my wisdom and my research. So let me see, where has he gone? Dr. Cohen, Mark, what? Why is your hand there? Oh my goodness! Uh, Dr. Magnificent. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I guess it's all me now. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I hope you enjoyed your little visit from Dr. Magnificent. Um, I'm gonna I'm gonna disappear us now into the land of screen sharing, so I apologize for that. And by the way, it was nice to be introduced to all of you. I did see some of you at the Puppet Slam a week or so ago. Very well done. I'm a fan of Mongo. Kind of freaked me out, but I'm definitely a fan. Um, and so let me pull up my presentation for us. Oops, I have to actually start the screen sharing first, don't I? You'd think I know how to do this by now. All right, let's share. Okay. All right, can everybody see that? So my presentation today is called Can Puppets Save the World? Puppets and Political Resistance. And well, okay, so it actually is Maggie's presentation, and she is very uh, appropriately deserving of the credit. But she doesn't really need to superimpose her name over the title. So let's try this again. Oh, look, I got a little bit of a mention there. Isn't that nice? Um, okay, so let me start by sharing with you what I'm what I'm going to accomplish today, and maybe what I'm not going to accomplish today. Um, in the work that I've done, I have not uncovered um, and I've not developed a definitive way to tell the history of puppetry's role in political resistance. And I kind of suspect that there isn't one. There isn't one way to tell this story. So what I'm showing you is necessarily partial and in some ways arbitrary. I'm highlighting the examples that I'm most familiar with, and that to my mind paint a picture of the nature of puppet-focused political resistance and some different forms that it's taken over time. And one of the things that what I hope you'll gain from this is, I mean, I think there's no one in this audience that thinks that puppetry, I don't imagine, although I could be wrong, but I suspect most in this audience already understand the value of puppetry goes far beyond the sort of notion that it's specifically for children, which is a very time limited American, I think, diminishment of the art. Um, so while I can't say that these examples that I'm giving you are the examples you should know, what I'm going to do is provide context for each and to the extent that I know it, and share why I believe that each is significant so that at least now, if you want to talk with people about the value of puppetry and particularly the role of puppetry in political resistance, you have some concrete examples that you can work from. So here's a little what I'm calling a chronological but otherwise arbitrary timeline. This is what I'm going to highlight today. And I've got mostly images, I've got a few videos. I'm hoping that we can wrap up my portion in about 40 minutes so that we have plenty of time to discuss and just enjoy and talk about it. And I will certainly try to entertain whatever questions you might have. But as you can imagine, in most cases, I was not there for any of these things, although I was at the Women's March in 2017. Um, but for the most part, I don't have firsthand knowledge of these events, and so I'm giving you the best information that I have. So we're going to start in Czechoslovakia, where, interestingly enough, over 2 centuries, there's some prominent ways in which puppetry has played a part in sustaining Czech culture. And then we'll move to Vermont in the 60s and 70s. I think a lot of people are familiar with Bread and Puppet, but we certainly have to include them in a discussion like this. We'll talk about the WTO demonstrations, the Battle for Seattle in 1999, very, very meaningful in this history, and the lesser known but also very important um, moments in Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia, brief mention of the Women's March, and then something that I found as I was starting to look for present day examples of political resistance through puppetry is the epic sock puppet theater. And I've got a short video on that. It's fascinating. I definitely need to learn more. I think you'll be really intrigued by that. So at any point as we go through this, if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute and chime in, or I'll try to keep an eye on the chat. Um, I see that my Zoom updated, so everything looks different again, just to throw me off. But I'll try to keep the chat open. It doesn't want to move off the center of my screen. Um, so any questions so far? All right, well, let's get started here. Let's talk about Czechoslovakia in the 17 and 1800s. So um, you might be familiar with, or maybe not, the very long history of the Habsburg Empire, which is was basically a German empire that spanned an enormous part of the globe, particularly what we would consider Europe today. Um, And in the late 1800s, um, Joseph II was had just become the emperor of that empire, and one of his early acts was to designate German as the principal language of government administration in all of the empire. And that doesn't seem like a particularly problematic act, perhaps, until you think about it as in the same way that if we might designate English as the official language of the United States and then not allow the use of any other languages in communications from government to people, right? So if the city of Seattle sent out ballots and didn't include Korean and Vietnamese and all the other languages that they include. And so it depends on who you talk to, as is often the case with history. Those outside of the Czech orbit would describe it as, not so much of a not an attack on Czech culture, but for the Czech people, this really felt like one among many other things that was happening that was a threat to Czech culture and and potentially the diminishment of the Czech language or the possible loss of Czech language. So you'll see some people who write about this part of the history of puppetry, and they will say that puppets help to save the Czech language. And so the response, and those of you who know your Punch and Judy history will recognize Kasperek, which who is essentially the Czech answer to Mr. Punch. Um, the it was puppet shows that featuring Kasperek that were instrumental, particularly in the eyes of many Czech folks, instrumental to keeping the Czech language alive. Um, and it was part of what we now know as what now is known as the Czech National Revival from in the late 1800s and 1900s. And so the puppets helped to preserve the folk stories. They were telling historic and patriotic stories, and I think most importantly, bridging different communities that were otherwise isolated, rural, and again, as we know that puppetry has done in many situations, bridging gaps in literacy. So people who may not be getting any news, may not be getting any information, may not be able to read. They're able to come to these traveling puppet shows, and the puppet shows were performed in Czech. And this is one of many situations, and there are situations that we could point to in China and other parts of Asia where and in Europe broadly over the 16th, 17th, 1800s, where when official cultural channels like theater were heavily censored, the beauty of the puppet show is that you run out to the town square, you open up your foldable puppet stand, your stage, you do your puppet show, and when the authorities come, you run like hell and get out of there. And an interesting side note about that is that one of the only reasons we know of this role of puppetry as resisting authoritarianism or challenging governments, we know about those not because we have any video or pictures. We certainly don't. What we have in some cases is the tickets, the physical tickets that puppeteers were given for doing an unauthorized performance. So for the Czechs, unfortunately, the challenges of authoritarian governments didn't end in the 1800s. And so in the 1930s, when Nazi troops invaded Czechoslovakia, one of the things that was instrumental in supporting the Czech people, keeping the Czechoslovakian culture alive, was Josef Skupa's shows featuring on the left, you have the smaller one, Spabel, and on the right, Horvinek. And I think I'm pronouncing that right, and that's why I tried to provide the pronunciation guide there. Um, so those are, again, we could go back even further than the 1700s to find examples. But this is one, these that relate to the Czech culture are some of the more ones that I was able to document a little bit more. Whoops, I didn't mean to jump to bread and puppet, but we might as well jump to bread and puppet. Again, if there's any questions, please jump in. Um, so I'm suspecting many of you are familiar with Bread and Puppet. I have to confess that I was not actually until a few years ago. But if you know them, you know that they were founded in 1963 by Peter and Elka Schumann. Elka passed away a few years ago. Eventually, they settled in Glover, Vermont, and the name reflects a philosophy. And I'll share a little quote here from Peter that reflects that philosophy. And if you know the history of the shows, you know that they had the big field. The puppets were made in these giant barns, and then they have a field around the acreage around, and they would just bring people in to watch the puppet shows, and they would bake loaves of bread and pass out the bread while they perform, that people could eat while they watched the puppet show. And so that was an enactment of a philosophy. Peter says, we give you a piece of bread with the puppet show because our bread and theater belong together. For a long time, the theater arts have been separated from the stomach. Theater was entertainment. Entertainment was meant for the skin. Bread was meant for the stomach. The old rites of baking, eating, and offering bread were forgotten. The bread became mush. We would like you to take your shoes off when you come to our puppet show, or we would like to bless you with the fiddle bow. The bread shall remind you of the sacrament of eating. And then he goes on to say, we want you to understand that theater is not yet an established form, not the place of commerce you think it is, where you pay to get something. Theater is different. It's more like bread, more like a necessity. And then, as you see here, he also said, we have two types of shows, good ones and bad ones, but all of them are for good and against evil. And the first very visible manifestation of that was in the late 60s with the bread and puppets that performed, displayed, paraded as part of Vietnam War protests. And so far as I know, and I'll have, this is a question for me that I can go back and explore further to see if I'm correct. But so far as I know, these are some of the first giant puppets in protest in the United States. Again, I could be wrong about that, so they're certainly some of the most well known. If you're a person of a certain age like I am, you probably have already seen these images and might be even more familiar with the Vietnam protests and the bread and puppets. And so here's one from DC on the left and from New York City in 1967 on the right. And here's another image of the Bread and Puppet Washington Vietnam March for Peace in November of 27 of 1965. And it was titled A Pageant of Death Based on President Johnson's Speech at Johns Hopkins. And I need to do some more exploration to find out what the nature of that particular speech was. And I apologize for not having more context to fill you in on. And if anybody has that context, please share it with me. Um, has anybody here ever been to a bread and puppet performance? You have, Abigail. Awesome.
In New York, they come down to New York about every year, and I saw them in New York City.
Awesome. I have I have a video of a performance that they did in a theater. Um, I want to say it was I don't know if 2022 maybe. That it builds on the philosophy of Kropotkin, the Russian philosopher Kropotkin, and it's about he makes they make a they play with the metaphor of that research that shows how trees communicate with each other and support each other, and he makes the point that if trees are going to can take care of each other that way, then we as humans should be doing the same. And he's got there are a number of simple cardboard puppets, and then there's also bed sheet art, which was another thing that Peter used in a number of performances. So then let's jump a little bit further ahead to 1999, and some of you may have been present for this. 1999, the World Trade Organization protests, or the Battle for Seattle, or the IMF, the battle against the IMF and the World Bank um, in Seattle, Washington. And by the way, all of these images that I'm sharing with you are either used with permission, or they've been culled from uh, established media, and I have the sources for them if you have any, if you're interested. So I'm just going to show you a couple of images from that. This is one, and here's a couple of other ones. This one here from on the top left is from my friend Kay Ruby Bloom, who you might know from Wise Fool Puppet Production or Puppet Interventions, um, based in, well, she's now based in Oregon and not doing puppetry currently, but she was there, and we're gonna see her in just a moment. Um, the significance, if you're not familiar with this, and you may very well be, but for those who aren't, the significance of this particular protest and the role of giant puppets really is twofold. One, uh, the protest shut down the World Bank meeting, right? The IMF meeting. They were supposed to meet for 5 days. I believe they were there for 3. And the pressure from the activists was so great that they flew out. They just left. And it's part of the reason why now, when these kinds of organizations, these international financial organizations or bodies meet, they meet in faraway places. They don't meet in the middle of cities because they know full well the kind of resistance that can happen. But the other thing that was so important about this is that the giant puppets played a big role, right? People really noticed the giant puppets. It drew, they were obviously they're visible. They draw media, and it's not like, at this time it wasn't like it is today, where anything, everybody's filming everything, and everything becomes a short video that ends up on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook or whatever. Um, so so there was a little bit more of a need, in a sense, for big visuals to draw people's attention. And of course, the puppets are designed to tell a story that also helps to educate people about what's happening and why they might be concerned about globalization, about the actions of the IMF, and these very sort of arcane economic dynamics, global economic dynamics. Puppets help to bring those down to a level where people could understand why it would be relevant to them. And so what one of the offshoots of this was that after 1999, if and I have this directly from the mouth of Kay Ruby Bloom, and also her puppeteer colleague Morgan Andrews, they uh, if you were doing a protest after Seattle, you needed giant puppets. Like all of a sudden, their phones were ringing off the hook because everybody saw the value that puppets had, and so they were like, we're going to do this demonstration. We need giant puppets. And what that led to was two perhaps predictable things. And I call this the rise of the puppetistas. Um, and so in the following year in Washington, D.C., there was what's known as the A16 demonstrations, and Ruby was there working through her her group Wiseful Puppet Intervention, that time based in San Francisco. Um, and I'm going to show you this video. This is her on C-SPAN in 2000 at the warehouse where they were working on making these giant puppets for the A16 puppet show. And then I'm going to tell you what happened. So I hope this will work. That I can just pull up the video and the sound will work for everybody. So let's see how this goes. I might have to close the presentation. Oh no, here we go. Let's see. Okay. So I'm gonna Abigail, I have you definitely on screen. So I'm gonna start this, and then if you can give me a thumbs up or let me know how the audio seems. Can you hear anything?
I think you have to share the screen that the video is playing in, or like the
Oh yeah,
tab.
good point. Good point. Thank you.
I always mess that up.
All right, I'm gonna stop the share here. And so much technology. I always count on my students to correct me when I screw up these kinds of things. Okay, let's try. Oh, wait, that's not right either. Try one more time. Where did it go? There it is. Okay, are we all seeing that? Let's try again. I'm going to back up a little bit. Can you hear it now?
Yes.
Let's see.
Can you turn it up really loud?
Yeah, hang on just a second. I'm trying to. Where's my pause? Okay. Let's see here. There's the volume. Okay. All right. Hopefully I won't break your eardrums. We'll go back to there. How's that?
Of being used for social commentary and critique actually through the history of the art form. And it's only here in the United States that people don't know that aspect of puppetry. So in a certain way, we're just acting in the lineage of puppetry for social change and political change. They're really great because they're a visual, highly visual presence. They are also a media magnet. The media loves to look at visuals, and they draw attention to the issues in a really colorful and wonderful way. And they highlight the fact that we're here to do nonviolent protest, that we're here as a peaceful assembly, as a festive assembly, to call attention to what we believe is right and wrong in the world.
Describe some of the puppets that you've made this week.
Well, some of them are quite funny and some of them are beautiful. We have a structural adjustment machine that chomps up some things and spits out other things. They, for example, chomp up landscapes and spit out factoryscapes, sort of reflecting the policies, the effects that we think the policies of the IMF and the World Bank have. We have a parade of shame that further shows the effects of those policies. And we have many, many, many liberation puppets, insurrection puppets, birds, hands, two gigantic heads that are 12 feet tall. And then we also have images of the impacted communities, puppets representing the impacted communities. We also have three evil puppets representing the WTO, the IMF, and the World Bank, who are sort of dark and foreboding with talon-like hands.
How many puppets have you made?
Well, I think hundreds. If you see behind me, there's many, many, many of these small format liberation birds. And I think they've made close to 100 of them. We also have hundreds of flat puppets, broad puppets that are fists, hands, also showing some of the more negative aspects. We have eviction booths, prisons. So we have really made hundreds.
Who carries all the puppets?
Everybody who comes to the action, we hope. We're working on an affinity group model here, and many different affinity groups have agreed to take out like a series of birds or a series of hands, or to hope certain puppets in their affinity group.
Where did you learn how to build puppets?
Well, I originally learned from In the Heart of the Beast mask and puppet theater from Minneapolis, but I've been doing this for about 12 years.
Why are you here?
I'm here because it seems like globalization is incredibly we're at a critical moment in history, and I wanted to give what I can give, which is I'm a puppeteer. I know how to build these things, and that was the way that I felt I could be the most effective in making change.
You'd be doing on Sunday.
I'll probably be organizing the puppets, schlepping them here and there, and I also have a costume and a drum, so I hope to make some noise.
Where's your hometown?
San Francisco?
How long have you been in Washington?
Rise on April 5th, so I don't know, I've 7 or 8 days I've been here.
What have you learned so far?
What have I learned so far? Well, I've learned that we can accomplish a lot if we work together, and we also have lots to learn.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Oops. I think I might have accidentally paused the recording for a minute there. Sorry. Okay, let me stop the share. So were you able to hear that okay? Awesome. So so that was perhaps the high moment of what was happening at the A16 in DC in 2000. The low moment, as Ruby reported to me, was that during the prep for this protest, our Convergence Center, that's the building that I'm showing you here, the Convergence Center where they were building all this stuff, was raided by the police, puppets were impounded, and this was the historical moment when the term puppetistas was coined, right? Because as they began to see, as the government began to see puppets as a threat, they wanted a term that represented puppets and resistance. So they began to talk about their work and their puppets as talk about themselves as puppetistas. And it didn't stop there. In 2000, later on at the Republican National Convention in Philadelphia, there was a raid on the warehouse, a group that had rented a warehouse to make giant puppets. They had 5 days of puppets planned. Each day was going to be a different social issue. So they had puppets related to healthcare, puppets related to gun violence, and several other issues. And then the 5th day was going to be all of the puppets. And so I'll read this from from a story related to that. At 2:05 p.m. on August 1st, over 180 police officers and 3 helicopters lay siege to a warehouse on 41st and Haverford on Philadelphia's west side. When we looked through a mail slot to survey the situation, the police sprayed mace at us. They tried to barge in through a keyhole in the roof, and failing that, videotaped, tape recorded, and spat at us through a skylight. All 75 of us inside the warehouse were detained for over 2 hours before any search warrant showed up. We would become known as the Haverford 70. And why? What sort of crime had we committed that was so heinous as to qualify for such an egregious show of force? We were making puppets. They were the props that would bear our messages of protest to the Republican National Convention. So you can see the lineage of 1999, the battle for Seattle here, which is that at the same time that activists started to see the real value of especially giant puppets for protest, for resistance, government started to realize what a threat that those puppets could be. So we had in 1 year 2 different instances of government sacking of warehouses where puppets were being built, and my understanding is that all the puppet making material in that warehouse in Philadelphia were destroyed, even though if you were thinking of prosecuting the people involved, you would think you would take those as evidence, but instead they were simply destroyed. Let's see. Okay. Oh, I see somebody. Eric, you put a video in the chat. So let me see. Maybe if I can just move through the rest of what I have, and then maybe we can circle back and watch that. I don't know how long it is, so okay, I'll get this out. So so we don't really see, as far as I'm aware, a lot of presence of giant puppets after 2000, but they do reappear uh, in 2017 and 2018 in the Women's March at the Women's March in Seattle. On the left side, you see Dolores Huerta, a legendary Latinx champion of farm workers and women. And to the best of my knowledge, in the bottom right, and up obviously above, you see folks working on those puppets. And on the bottom right, I believe what we have is these three women: Wangari Mahati, a Kenyan environmental activist; Angela Davis, Black feminist scholar, writer, and activist; and Malala Yousafzai, the Pakistani education activist, from left to right. And I would say that one of the things that is significant about the presence of these particular puppets is the different tenor that they have. You know, if you and as if you listen to Ruby's description of some of the puppets that they had, and I have some other images, they were, for lack of a better word, these were in your face puppets that were telling stories, that were talking about how a structural adjustment would lead to the destruction of one thing and the creation of another. Um, and having talked to Ruby in recent years, I know that one of her goals was to tell stories with the puppets and educate in that way. And I think what you see here is a sort of stepping away from that sort of in your face activist um, uh, kind of resistance, and more a celebration and honoring of powerful women. So sort of bringing their stories to our attention, but not actually using the puppets to confront the issues that motivate the march. Um, and what I'd like to leave you with is one more very, very recent example, and then I'm happy. I would love to hear what your reactions are, and what questions you might have, and open up the discussion. I don't know. Is anybody familiar with? I'm gonna make sure I can see people a little bit more. Is anybody familiar with Epic Sock Puppet Theater? Is that? I'm not seeing. Okay, I'm seeing thumbs down. Maybe a little. Okay. Well, this is new to me, but I'm really excited by it. Epic Sock Puppet Theater is actually designed to create awareness about something called sock puppet, right? Sock puppet turns out to be a term for um, malicious, false, or inflammatory media content designed to uh, uh, divide us, designed to mislead people, right? All those things that we think about, that social media and the algorithms have done to polarize us and to oftentimes create false narratives. Um, these are apparently, at least by some people, called sock puppets. And so the creators of Epic Sock Puppet Theater created a puppet show designed to educate people about this kind of media. And so I'll let them explain why the puppets look the way they do, why they did what, why it is what it is. But I think it's a really powerful and particularly 21st century example of puppets educating and challenging dominant narratives, or problematic narratives. So I'm gonna pull this up, and then I'll change the share so that we can see that. Here it is. hopefully the sound will be good on this one too. I'd love a thumbs up again if we can get it. And here we go. Oops. Nope. I'm getting all kinds of interference. I'm gonna minimize this and then start it. Hello. Oh, here we go. How's the volume?
Not hearing anything.
Oh, okay. Why is it there?
This is a story about a puppet show.
Yep.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah.
Okay, now you can hear it? Okay. All right. There's a icon that keeps getting in my way. So I'm sorry about that. All right, here we go. Well, I thought we were going. My goodness, what is it doing?
Oh, I love technology.
Yeah, the way they keep putting, okay. There's an icon that keeps showing up and it's right over the play button, and I keep moving it and okay, I moved it now. We should be good. I'll back up just a little bit. There we go. Okay. Isabel, I can see you, so when it starts talking, give me a thumbs up if you can.
This is a story about a puppet show that was able to fight the spread of disinformation. Our story starts not so long ago in the land of social media, where political punditry and perceived news bias had led many people to trust information from social media because it appeared to be from people like themselves. But the authenticity and trustworthiness of social media can easily be manipulated by creating fake accounts known as sock puppets. Sock puppets are pseudonymous online identities often used to make it appear as if there is more support for an argument or product than there actually is. Governments and public relations companies also use sock puppets to sway political opinions. Sometimes sock puppets are embedded into targeted communities to spy on them, to influence their actions, change their beliefs, or to undermine the goals of the community. The puppets can masterfully manipulate the emotions of people who are unaware that they are taking part in a real-life drama that can have actual consequences. Once immersed in the drama, the audience can become polarized, radicalized, and can become vectors for the spread of disinformation. Once accounts are revealed to be sock puppets, they are no longer effective. Research has shown that controlled exposure to sock puppet rhetoric and tactics can help people to recognize other sock puppets and become resistant to new disinformation campaigns. With this in mind, two artists realized that distancing techniques from epic theater could be used to familiarize the public with sock puppet disinformation tactics. Epic theater presents emotional and political content in ways that prevent over-identification with the characters or ideologies represented, creating the possibility for critical reflection. By combining techniques from epic theater with research and the analysis of disinformation data sets, the artists created epic sock puppet theater. The interactive animatronic puppet show resembles a combination of a classic Punch and Judy theater and a dystopian video game arcade. The sounds of the servo motors, exposed circuitry, and humorous cartoon-like voices of the puppets alienate the audience from the disinformation being presented, allowing them to critically reflect on rhetoric that had previously been weaponized in social media feeds. Emphasizing the constructiveness of the performance is both a metaphor for actual online sock puppets and a way to prevent over-identification with the characters or their messages. Because the puppets only perform in response to audience interactions, participants must acknowledge their complicity in the performance and perhaps in the sharing of online disinformation. In their efforts to distract, confuse, and polarize the public, sock puppets focus on a variety of topics, including climate change, racial tensions, military interventions, and police violence. They can be heard saying things like,
Scientists can't even predict tomorrow's weather, and you think they know what the climate will be in 100 years. Hashtag I'm a climate change denier.
Climate change denial has nothing to do with science or economics. It's about profit for polluters.
Somehow the new Ukrainian government has fallen in love with burning alive everyone who denies it.
If you point a gun at a cop and get shot, you are not a victim.
Pigs will be pigs. Hashtag pigs with badges.
The president of Russia signed a decree against anonymity on the internet. There can be only one troll in the country.
Struggles are better than shackles. Hashtag Brexit, hashtag vote leave.
USA and Saudi dictatorship founded Al-Qaeda against USSR, and Al-Qaeda turned into ISIS.
Black churches taught us to forgive white people. But pastors were wrong. White people cannot be forgiven.
You're racist if you deny you're racist.
I will carry the red flag stained with the blood of our forefathers and unswervingly follow the path of the Chinese Communist Party.
Looks like we were manipulated by the alt-right Twitter bot accounts.
The alt-left is literally ISIS.
while this may be the end of our story, it is only the beginning of epic sock puppet theatre. As long as there are sock puppets creating online disinformation, new datasets will be assembled to expand the animatronic puppet show while it travels from place to place, initiating conversations about disinformation and encouraging people to reflect before they react to content that may have been created by fake accounts.
All right. And that is, I have a thank you slide and some citations I can share with you, but I think I'll leave it there, so that I don't have to pull up a PowerPoint again and block us from seeing each other. So, thank you very much. That's what I have, and I'm very welcoming. I'd love to have a conversation with you about this. I hope it was what you were hoping for.
Okay, thank you.
A piece of information that might be helpful for you is that in 1915, they discovered that in the US that puppets were good for education of children.
Mm.
And until 1940, there were traveling troupes of full orchestras and full marionette shows of Shakespeare and variety shows that would travel the US. They weren't for kids, they were for everyone. But then the wars caused shortages, which stopped those. I would love to have seen those.
Mm.
And from that point on, suddenly puppets were only for kids in less than 100 years? No.
Yeah. Well, and I also I've seen some I have to go a little deeper into this. I know that there was also puppets used for Nazi propaganda, right? So it can go the other way for sure. So I don't want to I don't want to whitewash the history either. So yeah.
Hey, I'm not sure that I have a question, but I definitely have a comment. That was Mark. Oh wow, that was, I don't know what I was expecting, but that was perfect. So I was in the chat. Okay, all I was doing was referencing a quick scene in a movie. But what was so cool was that I remember this is a film. It's Across the Universe. It was a Beatles movie about the Vietnam War, and there's a scene where they're at a protest, and they're the big puppets, and I never thought about it. And then when you brought it up, that totally reminded me of that scene from the film, and I go, "Oh, that's what they were referencing. That was those big things." And so that's all it is a little clip to show you guys that. And it's not I'm sure, I mean, they made them for the film, I'm sure, right? Yeah. But now the other thing that just really got my brain going with your presentation was a couple things. And first off, my first thought was, in my experience, I see puppets, and I think like you started the presentation, I think in this group, in this Zoom, we see puppets as loving, compassionate expression. Somebody said it in their introduction that was just perfect.
Isabel.
Isabel, that puppets are you said it just yeah, phenomenal. And yet, in my personal experience, the majority of the people in the world I encounter, they find puppets disconcerting, frightening. They make them uneasy. They don't like them. They just don't like them. And and I just go, hey, I'm not about fighting that. I'm not about converting people. It's about, hey, I'm out here. If you like it, I'm just about introducing it to people who maybe haven't made an opinion yet. But now, when we talk about it in the context of your presentation, that really got me thinking. And it got me thinking about the fact that do you almost use that like the fear or something of puppets to really drive that message? And then I would almost take that one step further with your presentation, because you said how memorable and impactful in this world of social media where everyone's fighting for attention and everyone's trying to get attention. And by the way, in my 5 years, 6 years of social media experience and puppets, yeah, I am not killing it. No one is paying attention. No one is paying attention to puppets, okay? But that idea, the visualization, and I don't have any experience with well, I do have a little bit. I did a high school thing, but these large giant puppets and things used in protest, the idea, and I think about the effigies to our current president slash king, those are those are kind of puppet like, these giant things, and how that gets under people's skin, and the visuals. And so when you think about a protest, or the power of puppets, and the fact that those visuals are fluid and emotive.
Well, the Portland people dressing in inflatable costumes.
Yes,
Because it's so ridiculous to mace an inflated frog. It makes them
and the
into
opposition
fools.
didn't know how to handle it, did they? It
No, and
completely
they just
subverted
can't handle it.
Optics were so bad.
Yeah.
Because how could they go, these are horrible people that we need to fear, and there they are dancing around, puppets, basically, right? Yeah, thank you.
But
All
I
right, I'm going to
think,
stop talking. That was perfect.
Abigail.
Well, I you know about Fremont Arts Council. Yeah. I mean, if you want to see big puppets, they put the parade on every June.
Right.
And there's a lot of, they also, Seattle 350 does a lot of work at Fremont Arts Council creating art for their parades, whether it's puppets or banners or whatever. So it's a nice little hub there of creativity.
Yeah.
And the second one, Seattle Channel, do you know about it?
I don't think I do.
Julia should talk about it. I have a love. This inspired me on one of my projects, a love for this puppet channel. But Julia, will you tell them? You're in the know.
Yeah. So if you go to youtube.com, it's the Seattle Channel. And it is whatchamacallit. It is wait. It is puppets recreating city council meetings.
Brilliant.
Oh my God, I love that so much.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't.
Oh, I missed an ad. I'm sorry. This is it.
Sock puppets of all city council and different members of in the government that are
I have to watch them.
Brilliant. Yeah.
This is the beauty of, like, now my academic nighttime reading is watching that. That is perfect. Thank you, Julie. I can't wait to look at that.
Oh,
I
yeah.
did want to piggyback on something that Eric said because I think it points to an interesting thing and also a transition in the role of art in protest, which is sort of the bigger phenomenon. Like we have giant puppets, and then more broadly, art in protest. One of the things that the giant puppets show is that puppets don't have to be beautiful, right? They don't have to be warm and fuzzy, and that disconcerting nature is actually part of what you were saying, Eric. It's part of what's being used to get people's attention, to tap into, to hopefully get them to pay attention to something that they might otherwise not pay attention to. But in terms of what's happening now, with the particularly in Portland, but the rise of the inflatables, right? We had the rise of the puppetistas, and now we have the rise of the inflatables. This is my theory, and it's just a theory, but I believe that, or at least I surmise that one of the reasons why you didn't see giant puppets in the protests in Minneapolis, the protests in Portland, on and on, is that, in the 70s, and certainly maybe not so much in the 70s, but certainly in the 90s, because I lived through that time, right? There was not a real uh, significant concern that um, that those particular groups of people, and I would say partly because they were predominantly white protesters, but there was not a concern that they were going to be violently repressed, not a strong concern that they were going to be violently repressed. Whereas I think when you headed into what was happening in Portland and Minneapolis, and with the concerns and some of the actions of the current administration, I think there was a real awareness that they were ready to look for an excuse to crush, crush resistance. And then that goes to what Abigail was saying, right? Like if we make ourselves so ridiculous, how can you repress the ridiculous without looking like the tyrant that you are, right?
Well,
Whereas
just
if you
saying there were raids to destroy puppets.
I know, right? But
That's
yeah,
just ludicrous.
I know twice, and probably more often than that than we know of. But yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. There certainly are other reasons, like giant puppets take a while to create. You need a lot of space. You need the warehouse. The warehouse becomes a target. You need people to carry the puppets. So there are reasons why giant puppets are not always they're not always the answer. And when I use a title like "Can Puppets Save the World?" I'm being more provocative than instructional. But I also
Well,
think,
okay, yeah, but Mark, I mean, yeah, if somebody is when they in your story again, they did when they are having to make sure they destroy the puppets, isn't that
well,
a
no, the
key?
government did that for them. They didn't.
Well, okay, that's what I mean, right?
Yeah,
Okay, the destruction of puppets,
yeah,
isn't that an acknowledgement of their power?
absolutely, absolutely. That is exactly what it is. Yeah,
I
right.
mean,
And
I mean, they've acknowledged it. It's like
you
them saying, "Yeah, we can't
yeah,
put this into evidence because it's too power. They're too
we see it
powerful."
as a threat.
you see
Absolutely.
that too with like even when Sesame Street did a whole bit on, getting your vaccines during the COVID pandemic,
Mhm.
and so many people were like, "Oh, Sesame Street's woke. It's up like it's awful." They were like turning Big Bird into like, just a target.
They
So it's
wanted.
it is it's always political, even if it's like for kids, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
I mean, they wanted to, destroy Elmo after he said that he wanted both teams in the NBA finals to play well and have a good time.
And that's just basketball teams.
It's
Like
just a basketball team.
that's not even like a real issue.
There were some very angry New Yorkers,
I
very angry.
know. I'm like, leave them alone.
Hey, you know what? I learned that lesson though because I did a Go England thing for the World Cup, and then yeah, I feel like I lost subscribers. So this last game, I totally went a different direction. I was like, uh England, Argentina. Who do you want to
Yeah.
win? Well, we're going for both. I was like, we're not gonna make the Elmo mistake. Yeah, but even Elmo, you're right. He was just saying, yeah, you just can't win. Sports, everything is tough. Yeah.
Yeah. Craig, thank you for mentioning Spitting Image. That's I grew up watching Spitting Image here and there. So um, if you haven't seen those, that's mostly British, but they're also there are Biden and Trump episodes of Spitting Image, and there was a spin-off of some sort, I think, if I'm remembering right. So yeah, again, I definitely don't want to claim that what you just saw is definitive or completely inclusive or anything. It really was about highlighting some significant things and also maybe some things that you hadn't been familiar with, right? Because I wasn't familiar with the Washington A-16 and the raid in Philadelphia until recently.
Yeah, Spitting Image, by the way, I grew up on that in the 80s because I was in the UK at the time because I was in a military. My dad was Air Force, and so I was living in a tiny little village on top of a nuclear, missile. And they that was these are like rubber puppets that were based on political cartoons, I believe. I'm not an expert, right? But what I remember was, yeah, they had Reagan and and if you guys want to know about them, look up Genesis, there's a music
It's
video,
called the Land
War,
of
War of
what?
Confusion or Land of something or the,
Yeah, the
Yeah,
Land of
I think
Confusion.
Cheryl wanted to say something.
yeah.
Cheryl, were you trying to say something?
Oh, I have a couple of the puppets. I have rubber ones that I got in England years ago. I think I have Thatcher and Charles or something.
Cool.
What?
That's very cool.
Funny too that people say like, oh, puppets are for kids, considering like the Muppets are one of the most like famous, puppets like groups, and Jim Henson did not make that for children. Like they make jokes. Like I was rewatching it somewhat recently, and they were like, "There's some jokes that are pretty racy. Like they're definitely not intended for kids. Like kids could watch it because I did growing
Yeah,
up, but I didn't. I
yeah.
definitely didn't get everything that they were doing from it."
And there's
And if you
the Dark Crystal, that was his.
yeah.
Well, that was
And
the
if
art stuff that he was going to be doing more of once he sold Muppets to Disney, but instead died.
Well, and if you saw his early advertising stuff, the Wilkins coffee ads, they're so incredibly violent. They're great, but
I love them.
somebody gets squished, exploded, run over on
Just
in
like you said
15
in your
seconds.
just like you said in your presentation, they were subversive and attention getting and memorable. And yeah, he turns the little cannon and boom. And are you gonna drink our coffee?
Anybody else?
Yep. Yep. Anybody else have any thoughts or questions? I think we're getting close to time, are we not?
I did
How
have
much?
a one. I wanted to know if you had any more sources on like books, or I don't know about any
Yeah.
documentaries. I'm sure I would have found them, but like books, like anything like that.
I made a very small selected bibliography. Let me pull it up, and I'll also put it on. I can easily copy it into the chat. But so let me share again real quick. Okay, are we seeing that? Yes, I think we are. And so there's my thank you. Please do take my email if you want to, if something comes up, some thought occurs to you. This is another image. These are puppets that Kay Ruby Bloom and her troupe, Wise Fool, helped to create. And I just think they're beautiful. So I wanted to end with that. But here's a couple of again, it's very limited, but Morgan Andrews has an article called "When Magic Confronts Authority." If you have trouble finding it, I think I can get away with sending you a PDF of it. Um, uh, Kay Ruby has done a short history of radical puppetry that's just online, and then Peter Schumann has a very provocative piece called "The Radicality of the Puppet Theater." Um, I'm happy to provide additional sources, but those are a few that I that were really important to me. Um, and I will let me just pull them up again and put them in the chat for you if you want to look at them. Okay, back to Zoom. Okay, I think they're there, so you have them in the chat. Um, but I'm happy to
Thank you.
provide additional. Sorry, it's been a lot of it's been a lot of just searching and I feel like I'm not trained as a historian. I'm trained as a sociologist, although all good sociologists are historians on some level. But it's been challenging. It's because this is not, this is considered with puppetry being considered a low art, it doesn't get documented the way other way
Mhm.
other things are. So unless it causes problems, right? Or
Or as
unless
like a big success like the Muppets or
or like
Sesame
the
Street.
Muppets.
Yeah.
Right, right. And of course, anytime you're dealing with an area before, before moving pictures, before images, but nobody was, nobody was uh commissioning famous painters to do paintings of puppets, which I wish they did. That would make my life infinitely better. Craig, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just want to add, I really appreciate how you began the whole presentation by, like everything started with the Czechs back in the Habsburg times. But I, I want to say we've come full circle because indigenous people everywhere would agree that if you do a show in your local language, you're doing a political act. And not only that, you can do a lot that the only way you would be able to really learn it is through the indigenous language.
Mm.
So I've been working with puppeteers in other countries, and that's part of their holy grail to just sort of give the middle finger to their local government. Or there's coalitions of governments that are willing to accept indigenous people, doing their next step of re-owning and rejuvenating.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you brought that up, Craig, because it reminds me of an element that I did not include in this presentation, but it's worth mentioning. Um, in Malaysia, where wayang kulit, the shadow puppetry, is a very powerful and centuries long tradition of that form. There was concern, as there is across many cultures, about the decline of puppetry as an art. And so there's a group called uh, uh, Fusion Kulat, Wayang Kulat Fusion. I'd have to find it, but what they in 20 sometime in the 2010s they approached Steve, George Lucas, and they said we want to do a shadow puppetry version of Star Wars, and he gave them permission. Abigail, you've seen it. You've seen the yeah. The only thing that I've seen on video is a trailer for it. It's about 6 minutes long. It's brilliant. Like so, it's um, the music is very traditional, but as the music is playing and it's very kind of a tinny kind of sound, but then all of a sudden you hear the Emperor's theme, or like you notice it, right? All the puppets, again, shadow puppets stamped in color on leather, beautiful, intricate, and you can see Princess Leia's curls, right? They're recognizable, but they're recognizable in both traditions. It's so powerful. I can find a. I'll see if I can find a link for that while we're talking, and I'll throw it in the chat because it is brilliant.
I think I saw the same 6 minutes, but I was showing students it as an example.
Yeah, I've shown it in my class as well.
But what I really liked is how they said a lot of their characters that they were able to like combine characters, like you said, with their own uh
Yeah.
set of characters. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Um,
So they're also fusion. They're also
Yeah,
creating
it's fusion.
fusion with the. Yeah, here it is. It's in in Malaysian, it's called Peperangan Bintang. That's my best effort to do that.
Mark,
Yeah,
is it Malaysia or Indonesia? I think
I
of Wayang being in Indonesia, but I could be wrong.
no, I think you're right, but I thought that this is Fusion Wayang Cohen. I thought this was Malaysian, so
Okay.
I'll let me check on that. But I'm gonna put the I just found the link for that preview. I'm gonna put it in the chat. I recommend this to everybody because it's so interesting. Although it's just showing Bing videos. See if that, yeah, I think that try that. Somebody try the link and let me know if that works. But I think it will.
It works.
Okay, great, great. Um, yeah, I think Craig, did you have something else, or
No,
I've seen two hands.
I did some of my work in Indonesia, and it's the same stories in Malaysia. Well, I can just imagine they're taking Arjuna or Rama or one of the incarnations of Vishnu and putting it right into Luke Skywalker's
Yeah,
costume,
yeah.
and it's easy. That's how puppets have kind of been passed down, I think, for millennia.
Yeah, it's I was in Taiwan in 2023 with the Northwest Puppet Center. You probably know the Northwest Puppet Center.
Yeah.
And the thing that I take away from it which kind of speaks to this is it's very common to have the puppet shows are for the temples, right? Temples hire troops to put on puppet shows, and the puppet shows are the same traditional mythic stories. And when we went there as, guests, of course, we sat and watched the puppet show. Like, we were interested. We're sitting, they have chairs set up, but there was nobody else. Like, everybody else, for them, it's background noise. They've heard this, they know the stories. It has to be there, right? It's part of their tradition. It's part of the culture. It's what they do, but they don't need to pay attention to it any more than you and I would pay attention to another rerun of a Seinfeld episode because we've seen it so many times. So it was very funny to see these people who were sitting watching the puppet show in a language that we didn't speak or understand, because we were just puppet enthusiasts. So, Eric?
Yeah, so I just want to just add one more time, thank you, Mark. And I really appreciated you talking about being a sociologist versus a historian versus, and I mean, you're a puppet fan and you didn't quite admit that, but okay. But what I want to tell you is that I work on a series called Puppet of the Day, which is so simple. It's just show and tell. Here's a puppet, okay? And what I figured out is that researching puppets or puppetry or puppet history is so freaking difficult, and AI is completely fails because AI is based on what's out there. And if it can't find anything out there and it doesn't want to disappoint you,
It'll make it up.
just starts making up the most crazy, random. Yeah, you want to talk about hallucinations?
Yeah.
Ask AI, any of your large language models, you ask them about puppet history, and you will get some wacky stuff. And so I can't trust AI anymore, at least for my work. And I think that the historical information about puppetry and that puppetry one, and then the other side, right? The manufacturers, the toy companies, the who made them and when they made them, and what the heck puppet is this, right? It's woefully. So I just want to say thank you for tonight, and more importantly, thank you for what you do, and I would encourage you to please go ahead and do more and more puppet research. I love it.
Thank you, Eric. Encouragement goes a long way for me. Thank you. I appreciate that so much.
My master's degree thesis was about puppetry.
Yes.
And there are some very unusual studies and things out there that they may not actually cite puppetry itself, but entertainment. One that was about minor league baseball and entertainment and the commonalities of issues they have, because isn't sports entertainment? But it was a study that was out there that I was able to use in my thesis, all about a particular aspect of puppetry.
That's
and a
awesome.
solution to the problem of accessibility of puppetry.
Mm. Well, actually, that's a great segue for me to say, like, if anybody has any sources, anything you think that would be helpful to me, please send it on. You've got my email address. I'm gonna put it back in the chat too, so it's there. Um, yeah, this is I by no means do I consider myself an expert. I'm just starting to kind of pull some things together. But there aren't a lot of people doing this kind of work, and so let's build it up. Because I mean, one of the things that this shows is that if we don't document the things, we lose them, right? We lose the history if we don't document it. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, this has been wonderful. We are hitting 8:30. I'm sure we could keep talking. Definitely, it was a delight to have you. And maybe when you learn more, you can come and share more with us. We can all share what we have been working on that might relate. We always have our Facebook page and our website. We'd love to have any of you that were guests if you want to come to more of our programming. It's not much to join our guild. We do most of them on Zoom. We are starting to add some hybrid ones because we miss being together, but we still have mostly Zoom, especially while the president's in California. So we're going to have a quick meeting for the guild. So if you don't want to be part of that, you're welcome to leave. I will get the recording together. So if you would like a copy of that, email me and at popsprez@gmail.com, the same one that you RSVP'd through. And I will get that link to you once I get it up on YouTube. Because I'm not going to advertise it openly unless Mark's okay with that. So
It's fine with me.
okay.
Post
So
as you like.
that will be available, but it'll take me probably a day to do that. So
Right. All right. Well, I'll jump off so you can have your meeting. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to talk with all of you, and please be in touch if you want to talk more about this. And Isabel, I love your puppet.
Thank you. This
And
is
the
Kale.
kale. I love it. Kale puppet.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.